Hey listeners, I'm having to record on my phone again. I don't get why. Something's going on with my Chromebook. But as long as I can do lives from it, I guess we'll be all right. Chapter 23 in Anne of Avonlea. Oh no, now my light's flickering. Miss Lavender's Romance. Woo. I think I'll take a walk through to Echo Lodge this evening, said Anne one Friday afternoon in December. It looks like snow, said Marilla dubiously. I'll be there before the snow comes, and I mean to stay all night. Diana can't go because she has company, and I'm sure Miss Lavender will be looking for me tonight. It's a whole fortnight since I was there. Anne had paid many a visit to Echo Lodge since that October day. Sometimes she and Diana drove around by road, sometimes they walked through the woods. When Diana could not go, Anne went alone. Between her and Miss Lavender had sprung up one of those fervent, helpful friendships, possible only between a woman who has kept the freshness of her youth in her heart and soul, and a girl whose imagination and intuition supplied the place of experience. Anne had at last discovered a real kindred spirit. While into the little lady's lonely, sequestered life of dreams, Anne and Diana came with the wholesome joy and exhilaration of the outer existence, which Miss Lavender, the world forgetting by the world forgot, had long ceased to share. They brought an atmosphere of youth and reality to the little stone house. Excuse me, I wet my whistle. Charlotta the Fourth always greeted them with her very widest smile, and Charlotta's smiles were fearfully wide, loving them for the sake of her adored mistress as well as for their own. Never had there been such hijinks held in the little stone house as were there that beautiful, late, lingering autumn when November seemed October over again, and even December at the sunshine and hazes of summer. But on this particular day, it seemed as if December had remembered that it was time for winter and had turned suddenly dull and brooding with a windless hush, predictive of coming snow. Nevertheless, Anne keenly enjoyed her walk through the great gray maze of the beechlands. Though alone, she never found it lonely. Her imagination peopled her path with merry companions, and with these she carried on a gay, pretended conversation that was wittier and more fascinating than conversations are apt to be in real life, where people sometimes fail most lamentably to talk up to the requirements. In a make-believe assembly of choice spirits, everybody says just the thing you want her to say, and so gives you the chance to say just what you want to say. Attended by this invisible company, Anne traversed the woods and arrived at the fir lane just as broad feathery flakes began to flutter softly. At the first bend, she came upon Miss Lavender standing under a big, broad, branching fir. She wore a gown of warm, rich red, and her head and shoulders were wrapped in a silvery gray silk shawl. "You look like the queen of the Firwood Fairies," called Anne merrily. "I thought you would come tonight, Anne," said Miss Lavender, running forth. "I'm doubly glad, for Charlotta the Fourth is away. Her mother is sick and she had to go home for the night. I should have been very lonely if you hadn't come. Even the dreams and the echoes wouldn't have been enough company. Oh, Anne, how pretty you are," she added suddenly, looking up at the tall, slim girl with the soft rose flush of walking on her face. "How pretty and how young. It's so splendid to be 17, isn't it? I do envy you," concluded Miss Lavender candidly. But you are only 17 at heart, smiled Anne. No, I'm old, or rather middle-aged, which is far worse, sighed Miss Lavender. Sometimes I can pretend I'm not, but other times I realize it, and I can't reconcile myself to it as most women seem to. I'm just as rebellious as I was when I discovered my first gray hair. Now, Anne, don't look as if you were trying to understand. 17 can't understand. I'm going to pretend right away that I'm 17 too, and I can do it. Now that you're here, you always bring youth in your hand like a gift. We're going to have a jolly evening. Tea first. What do you want for tea? We'll have whatever you like. Do think of something nice and indigestible. Those were sounds of riot and mirth, and there were sounds of riot and mirth in the little stone house that night. What with cooking and feasting and making candy and laughing and pretending, it's quite true that Miss Lavender and Anne comported themselves in a fashion entirely unsuited to the dignity of a spinster of 45 and a sedate schoolma'am. Then, when they were tired, they sat down on the rug before the grate in the parlor, lighted only by the soft fireshine and perfumed deliciously by Miss Lavender's open-nosed jar on the mantel. The wind had risen and was sighing and wailing around the eaves, and the snow was thudding softly against the windows, as if 100 storm sprites were tapping for entrance. I'm so glad you're here, Anne, said Miss Lavender, nibbling at her candy. If you weren't, I should be blue, very blue, almost navy blue. Dreams and make-believes are all very well in the daytime and the sunshine, but when the dark and storm come, they fail to satisfy. One wants real things then, but you know this. Wait a minute. One knows these real, but you don't know this. 17 never knows it. At 17, dreams do satisfy because you think the realities are waiting for you further on. When I was 17, Anne, I didn't think 45 would find me a white-haired little old maid with nothing but dreams to fill my life. But you aren't an old maid, said Anne, smiling into Miss Lavender's restful wood-brown eyes. Old maids are born, they don't become. Some are born old maids, and some achieve old maidenhood, and some have old maidenhood thrust upon them, parodied Miss Lavender whimsically. You're one of those who have achieved it then, laughed Anne, and you've done it so beautifully that if every old maid were like you, they would come into fashion, I think. I always like to do things as well as possible, said Miss Lavender meditatively. And since an old maid I had to be, I was determined to be a very nice one. People say I'm odd, but it's just because I follow my own way of being an old maid and refuse to copy the traditional pattern, Anne. Anne, did anyone ever tell you anything about Stephen Irving and me? Yes, said Anne candidly. I've heard that you and he were engaged once. So we were, 25 years ago, a lifetime ago. And we were to have been married the next spring. I had my wedding dress made, although nobody but Mother and Stephen ever knew that. We'd been engaged almost all our lives, in a way. Almost all our lives, you might say. When Stephen was a little boy and his mother would bring him here, when she came to see my mother, and the second time he ever came, he was 9 and I was 6. He told me out in the garden that he had pretty well made up his mind to marry me when he grew up. I remember that I said thank you, and when he was gone, I told Mother very gravely there was a great weight off my mind at 9. Oh my God. Because I wasn't frightened anymore about having to be an old maid. How poor Mother laughed. And what went wrong? Asked Anne breathlessly. We just had a stupid, silly, commonplace quarrel. So commonplace that if you'll believe me, I don't even remember just how it began. I hardly know who was more to blame for it. Stephen did really begin it, but I suppose I provoked him by some foolishness of mine. He had a rival or two, you see. I was vain and coquettish and liked to tease him a little. He was a very high-strung, sensitive fella. Well, we parted in a temper on both sides, but I thought it would all come right, and it would have if Stephen hadn't come back too soon. And, my dear, I'm sorry to say, Miss Lavender dropped her voice as if she were about to confess a predilection for murdering people. But I'm a dreadfully sulky person. Oh, you needn't smile, it's only too true. I do sulk, and Stephen came back before I had finished sulking. I wouldn't listen to him, and I wouldn't forgive him, and so he went away for good. He was too proud to come again. And then I sulked because he didn't come. I might have sent for him, perhaps, but I couldn't humble myself to do that. I was just as proud as he was. Pride and sulkiness make a very bad combination. But I could never care for anybody else, and I didn't want to. I knew I would rather be an old maid for 1,000 years than marry anybody who wasn't Stephen Irving. Well, it all seems like a dream now, of course. How sympathetic you look, Anne. As sympathetic as only 17 can look. But don't overdo it. I'm really a very happy, contented little person, in spite of my broken heart. My heart did break, if ever a heart did, when I realized that Stephen Irving was not coming back. But Anne, a broken heart in real life isn't half as dreadful as it is in books. It's a good deal like a bad tooth, though you won't think that a very romantic simile. It takes spells of aching and gives you sleepless nights now and again. But between times, it lets you enjoy life and dreams and echoes and peanut candy, as if there were nothing to remember with that. And now you're looking disappointed. You don't think I'm half as interesting a person as you did 5 minutes ago when you believed I was always the prey of a tragic memory bravely hidden beneath external smiles. That's the worst, or the best, of real life. And it won't let you be miserable. It keeps on trying to make you comfortable and succeeding even when you're determined to be unhappy and romantic. Isn't this candy scrumptious? I've eaten far more than good for me already, but I'm going to keep recklessly on. After a little silence, Miss Lavender said abruptly, "It gave me a shock to hear about I'm going to have to stop in a minute because the lines are going together again. Gave me a shock to hear about Stephen's son that first day you were here, and I'd never been able to mention him to you once, but I've wanted to know all about him. What sort of boy is he?" "He's the dearest, sweetest child I ever knew, Miss Lavender, and he pretends things too, just as you and I do." I'll stop right there. Have a wonderful Tuesday. I'm not on today, but I'll be around in other people's chats, I suppose, if I can stay awake. I got lots of stuff to get done. I have lots of that dyed cotton that I need to cake up. Hopefully it won't be too tangled. I won't have to spend forever on it. Y'all, this Malabrigo. Oh. If you didn't see me with this yesterday on my live, I think it was my live. Malabrigo is the stuff. This is called Sandbank, 440 yards, sock weight, or fingering weight. Yep. Okay, well, I'm going to let you guys go and like I said, have a happy day. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. And I'll be live at 5 tomorrow. So set your alarms. Love ya. Bye.